Yeah, yeah. We had it. Nobody is glad that we got it. Nobody even wants to care if I had it, man. If I was it, man, why the hell? I don't even feel like it, man. Nobody even had it, nobody even wants it. I don't blame them because I don't even want it, they got it. And that's the kind of bullshit that fucking song I just heard sounds like. We had it. We got it, we won it, we had it. I'm glad that I had it, but now I don't have it. I gotta go get it, but how can I have it? Like stupid shit like that, man. And those get fucking millions of fucking views. Like, I mean, society is fucked pretty much. If you think that's a good song, then you must have more fucking, then you must have more fucking issues than I ever did. Like, god damn. It's like that's like fucking putting cheese, like fucking what's it called? Oh wait, they're gonna get treasure here. That's like putting a fucking cheese, like a cheese cutter in a fucking grinder, and like yeah, like a cheese cutter or in a fucking blender, and like see what that sounds like. It's gonna fucking hurt your ears and make your ears go beep. And then yeah, we got it, we don't have it.
Again, not that that means anything anymore now that the game's data is almost all completely out there at this point. And it's not that I think that that was a bad decision, because it definitely benefits me, because this is the shit I enjoy, but also them, because it gets more people talking about their game, I guess. But obviously the effect that was going to have is that it led to the situation we're in today, and that we're in now, where people, to this day, claim to see fucking Sasquatch lumbering, shambling around in the woods of fucking GTA San Andreas, despite, and really, needless to say, the fact that they don't. Guess what? It's not real, and that's it. And that's not a secret or really news to anyone, much like the fact that this game is famously not even half the size it was intended to be, having probably one of the most well-known development crunches ever. Sure, it's still huge, but, like, the way certain mechanics aren't fully realized and just sort of dumped on you partway through the game, the way the ending literally comes out of nowhere, the way, I don't know, pedestrians literally fall from the fucking sky all over the map, you'd think if filling those holes was a luxury they had, that'd be number one on the list. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bigfoot was just another thing that didn't quite make it. Not even necessarily in the creepy kind of way it went on to become nowadays. Maybe it was even meant to be comedic, or a really standard, boring sequence of side missions, like how in GTA 3 there's a bunch of weird shit left over from the cut Dark Hell content. The footprint on the map is a really standard, boring sequence of side missions, like how in GTA 3 there's a bunch of weird shit left over from the cut Dark Hell content. The footprint on the map is a bit weird, but imagine if there was, like, no mission associated with the military base, for example, or the stories that would spawn. And, I mean, some people don't even let that stop them. Oh, case in point, this game's UFO.
This is fucking stupid.
Oh, case in point, this game's UFO sightings. Flying saucers, aliens, government conspiracies, astral cults, and everything else in between. Naturally, the result of putting in a secret underground military base in a desert modeled on Area 51 was that everyone's imagination took off running. Or did it? But in reality, I think this example specifically is a lot less their fault, seeing as in the same way LA would feel wrong without Hollywood, Nevada would just feel wrong without Area 51. And let's be fair, if you're trying to capture the essence of a literal desert, I mean, you're not swimming in options for content, which is probably why this game of all games did so much in the area of mythical creatures in general, because, well, they couldn't do as as much with GTA 4, for example, evident by the fact that they did fuck all with GTA 4. Like Bigfoot, the rumours begin and end with what there actually is, though. Just decoration. And again, it's possible that more was planned, the remnants of which can be seen in the weird pedestrians and their dialogue, radio ads, every barbershop employee's outfit, and creepy culty dialogue. Uncle brother. As for the famous blue-windowed house, though, guys, I think the windows might just be blue. I think we might be looking a bit too deeply into that. The fact that they eventually got to the house, though, guys, I think the windows might just be blue. I think we might be looking a bit too deeply into that. The fact that they eventually got to it in GTA 5 would seem to support that, but because it's such a famous thing in this game now, they could have just been referencing the rumours, so we'll never really know. Especially since they put their foot down on ever addressing it. So, what is actually here? Well, UFOs for one. Oh yeah, that's right, they're real, by the way. Real in the sense that they are just unidentified. Which, yeah, is a bit of a cop-out, and if I was watching this and some guy pulled that shit, I would not be having any of it, I'd say that much. But again, and to return to the point of this video, if you're 13 and catch that in the very corner of your eye for less than 1 second, what else are you going to think it is? And then, on top of that, it's another really rare occurrence, which I think adds everything to it, because like the falling pedestrians, there's next to no video evidence of it happening, despite how many people play this game. Which also means that every time it's brought up, it's explained in a fucking essay written by a non-native English speaker on some weird-ass forum, leaving a lot of room for interpretation. I mean, to ruin it completely, it's literally just the seam of a certain fog effect clipping into the skybox for like a fraction of a second, although it's a weird coincidence that it only happens with the deserts or mountains skybox, where you'd most likely be looking for UFOs. But that's all it is, and that's all it can be, again, a certain fog effect clipping into the skybox for like a fraction of a second, although it's a weird coincidence that it only happens with the deserts or mountains skybox, where you'd most likely be looking for UFOs. But that's all it is, and that's all it can be.
The moon.
Again. Assuming obviously that the reported sightings are truthful and that they know those blinking red lights are supposed to be planes, and, well, that they didn't get a good enough look at the black dot in the first place to not assume it was just a bug anyway. Because let's just say you have to be very 13 to jump straight to UFO for some reason. But like I've also said, I'm being very kind while I make this. There are some dumb people out there, don't get me wrong, but you have to know what, like, a bird looks like in this game, for example, because if that's the level we're on, finger painting might be more your thing.
Green fog.
If I were to somehow spin this into a tragedy, though, it would be how disappointed I am that the most interesting and, more importantly, actually plausible myths by far are also seemingly the most unheard of. Alongside Bigfoot, not even days after the game's release, screenshots of players encountering a really rare, ominous green fog started popping up online and all over forums. Although, unlike Bigfoot, making it infinitely more believable, was the context in which it was brought up was always more like a confused person looking for tech support than just some kid who somehow discovered the super secret, incredibly complex method to unlocking Bigfoot. As in, it was always just otherwise trustworthy people asking if it was normal, if they could fix it, if it was supposed to be happening, and what they might have done to have caused it. But then, due in large part to everyone just not knowing what was going on, they could only look at, like, just to name a few examples, all the Easter eggs like the bio well heavily implying for some reason that the mass dumping of chemical waste was taking place, then the real in-game mission and associated models in the game's data that seemed to support the theory that chemicals played a larger part in this game than they actually did, which is more than can be said for literally every other myth in this game. The fact that it all takes place in and around the main Sprunk factory, which billboards and vending machines of can be found literally all over the game. I wasn't convinced of some Ben-drowned-ass paranormal ghost-in-the-machine shit, but I honestly believed it could have just been some rare Easter egg poking fun at the state of American drinking water and junk food standards. And is that not absolutely something Rockstar would do? It wasn't impossible to believe is what I'm saying. It also really isn't impossible to see now from this that it's all only just another bug caused by certain textures and effects not being compatible with the lower bit depths that were, for some reason, and despite that, still available in the graphics menu of the PC version when it launched. Another perfect example, by the way, of how could they possibly have fucked something that basic up. It must be intentional, but they did, and we're still dealing with the fallout today. The infinitely rarer and harder to replicate red fog is the result of just waiting around long enough in the desert for a convenient sandstorm to take place during sunset, then just booking it across the map fast enough for it to not update once you've reached the woods, in what is the smallest window of time you will ever be given for anything. And since I'm also playing the PC version where the atmospheric effects are just kind of fucked in general, in the end I really just had to throw my hands up. But my point's still there. And so, as far as the explanation side of things, that just about summarizes everything. But I've also come to learn that that's by far the worst part. If it's not a bug, it's an Easter egg. And if it's not an Easter egg, it's leftover beta content. And if it's not leftover beta content, it's schizophrenia. And I think
schizophrenia.
If it's not a bug, it's an Easter egg. And if it's not an Easter egg, it's leftover beta content. And if it's not leftover beta content, it's schizophrenia. And I think deep down, everyone knows that, obviously, which is something I really had to force myself to come to terms with while making this. Because, thinking back to the first time I ventured into the woods of this game, specifically in the dark, just to walk around in circles in complete silence for hours in search of whatever happened to have captured my attention online that week, I honestly can't figure out whether or not I was doing it looking for an answer, or whether I even really wanted one, to be honest, or, more importantly, whether even the tiniest part of me even believed there was any truth to any of them in the first place. Because, honestly, I doubt I would have really been satisfied if I was to find out it was just a secret unlockable side mission, a bug, or an Easter egg. It's embarrassing, and I don't want to admit it, but I'm getting more and more aware of the fact that I don't actually really care. It's dumb and borderline psychotic, but all of what I enjoy about this stuff is in my own head, and I'm definitely not the only one with that, at least. You only have to look at how hostile and dismissive the responses are to anyone simply offering a rational explanation to someone's claim. Because, again, no... With that, at least, you only have to look at how hostile and dismissive the responses are to anyone simply offering a rational explanation to someone's claim.
What up, man?
Video game environments are something I've never quite been able to fully get over. Despite now being overwhelmed to almost every other emotion, the magic and wonder of exploring games is at least still very much as there as it was during my first interaction with them, which is apparently unusual, because although it's true no one plays games typically until being screamed at an hour into Max Payne because I haven't got out the starting area that I realised I play them the wrong way. A weird, twisted, messed up way that involves not so much exploring as just looking around, or mentally stripping back and ignoring all of the context and gameplay to leave an entirely different atmosphere created solely from the environment itself. That's regardless of whether or not the elements that contribute to that are intentional, unintentional, good design choices, or bad. Before I say anything else though, I really want to just be clear when I also say this isn't me being all because of my superior intellect, because honestly, if anything, it's the opposite, since the way I play games involves dumbing down and just zoning out all of the context and gameplay that's supposed to prevent me from interpreting them in the way I do. And let's just say that takes a very special kind of person, the same kind of person that would also play games in Japanese just for the aesthetic of the characters, which, don't worry, I'm not sad enough to go that far away that when I'm made aware of it, really loudly, an hour into Max Payne, I realise it's actually really bizarre and interesting enough to cover here, because the one huge upside of this horrific deformity is that even the worst, most irredeemably bad game can actually be an undiscovered, surreal, atmospheric masterpiece. Because, like I've said, when environment design is good, it's good, and when it's bad, it's still pretty good, especially and above every type, though this always applies most to the urban cityscape. Because when it comes to deserted wastelands, for example, and I've been to many apart from Swindon, yep, that's pretty much, I'd say you nailed it, right there, done. But with cities and urban environments, because there's a lot more moving parts and details involved in emulating them, there's a lot more that could potentially go wrong, therefore there are more examples of them going wrong, more so than with deserts, jungles, or literal hellscapes, for example. Despite this insane obsession, though, what's kept me from just laying it all out sooner is the fact that the point I'm making ultimately boils down to, you couldn't do it, so why did you try? And, you know, if you start teaching that in schools, I can't imagine you'd get many rocket scientists. But also because of how hard it seems to be for people to relate, which is definitely due to a misunderstanding enough because they're sick of hearing me go on about it all the time. So I made this.
What's remembered lives. It's been many years since I started out for goal. I maybe spent too much of my life just remembering. Bits and pieces, all worth every just keep on. Driving down the highway, roll down the window. What the nomads are doing is nothing different than what the pioneers did.
Bruh, what the hell? That's a weird death.
Things I know most about this life is that there's no final goodbye. Just say, I'll see you down the road. Hey, find anything interesting? Rock!
There's no such thing as a goodbye. Just I'll see you down the road.
So that I hopefully actually make sense when I start talking about more subtle examples, though I've decided to begin this with the most extreme, insane, far-out game I could possibly think to apply this to. Then found one even dumber than that. Power Rangers Dino Thunder on GameCube. It's a low-budget kids game based on an also low-budget TV show that consists in large part of repurposed footage from an entirely different, better Japanese TV show. A game that also thought it could do an open-world sprawling city level. And it couldn't. So why did it try? I thought it was a good place to start because of the contrast between what I'm pointing out and the obstacle of there quite clearly being a fucking giant bright red robot T-Rex in the center of the screen. So if it'll help, I'll just smash in a little blur. There we go. Level 3 in Power Rangers Dino Thunder is, like I've been casually hinting at, a city that creeps me out when I look way too deeply into everything. Things like the unnervingly gigantic sun, the city being in constant perpetual twilight and positioned in the middle of nowhere, surrounded on all sides by a seemingly infinitely stretching mountain sea. There being this one tanker that just constantly circles really, really slowly because, or despite the only exit being this one bridge for everything, not being you, any cars or the boat, or even just the street being completely devoid of pedestrians. Again, I feel like I've been more than clear in saying I'm definitely the weird one here. I'm not for a second implying that anyone else should pick up on this stuff, but the point's still there that, you know, if you want to, there's now a reason to play Power Rangers Dino Thunder, I guess. I'm not dumb enough to actually think that this is anything other than a level created to the best of their ability and to their technical and time constraints, though no doubt I'm thinking who'd be pathetic enough to look that deeply into it. Well, hi, my name's Jay, but at the same time, though, you'll never actually know when there isn't. Time constraints, though, no doubt, while thinking who'd be pathetic enough to look that deeply into it. Well, hi, my name's Jay, but at the same time, though, you'll never actually know when there is a deliberate attempt at bringing the tone down. I mean, obviously not alongside the robot T-Rex, but you know what I mean, because I guess in a way you could look at this as being a good point in support of how you personally interpret games being more important than how they were intended to be during development. Maybe.
Truth.
Am I an idiot? Yeah. Well, which is why I normally tend to
Yeah.
or even just dark theme more than how they were intended to be during development. Maybe. Am I an idiot?
Yeah.
Well, which is why I normally tend to avoid bringing up horror or even just dark themed games, because to point something like broken windows or ambient wind noises out usually conjures the response, "Congratulations, Jay, you've discovered the point." In other words, because to point something like broken windows or ambient wind noises out usually conjures the response, "Congratulations, Jay, you've discovered the point." In other words, although aspects like that may contribute to an atmosphere, it's not as fun or interesting.
Yeah, man, British TJ, you know.
But at the same
You know how it
time,
is.
though, I often have a hard time telling, to be honest, so sometimes you can only really just enjoy it regardless. Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness
Don't worry, man.
dark-themed
If you're wondering, this dude, his name is like Joyless. His name is Joyless, and he's just the British version of TJ. He's like the alternate universe version of me, where I was born in Britain, and I speak British. I speak a little bit British. Yeah, man. Don't think about it. Brain hurts.
Basically heroin.
Fuck you.
So what you end up with is that. It's really something else, and I love it.
I hate it. Stupid. It's dumb. Poopy. Poopy. It's all it is.
The
Poopy.
effect this had on the environment is surreal. Firstly, you have the fact that the engine only allows for as much breathing room as the actual Paris. Then you have the reoccurring classic of there being literally no entrance or exit anywhere. I mean, that's just from Silent Hill there. There's only 3 people at opposite ends of the level, none of which act or react to anything, at least initially. Being literally no entrance or exit is surreal. Firstly, you have the development team with it often have a hard time. But
Yeah. Manam. Satan. Satan. Ah!
contribute to an atmosphere, it's not as fun or interesting if it's intentional, but at the same time, though, I often have a hard time telling, to be honest, so sometimes you can only really just enjoy it regardless. Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness is a dark-themed game from a development team within a studio way too talented and more than experienced in creating ancient, abandoned, atmospheric, eerie tomb levels. Except here, they were tasked with creating semi-open world urban levels, which, on top of the fact that the game as a whole was famously rushed and let's just say not very polished in general, equal words that are basically heroin to me. So what you end up with is that. It's really something else, and I love it. The effect this had on the environment is surreal. Firstly, you have the fact that the engine only allows for as much breathing room as the actual Paris. Then you have the reoccurring classic of there being literally no entrance or exit anywhere. I mean, that's just from Silent Hill there. There's only 3 people at opposite ends of the level, none of which act or react to anything, at least initially. The general derelict state, the design itself being bad, having this weird walled-off park with underground station access taking up half of it. The broken windows and wind ambience make this another spot-on example of exactly what I'm trying to say, except I do get that even if this was unintentional here, it wouldn't matter, because it's Tomb Raider and the angsty, edgy reboot one on top of that. As much as I'm trying to justify my perspective and hopefully get some people to relate, when it comes to this, it's way too easy to just give or take credit and go, yeah, I meant to do that. That was me. So, what I actually really need and what I feel always works best is a game where the developers have every incentive to keep even the slightest hint to any strange, eerie, ulterior subtext out of their game. One where a major tonal shift would absolutely matter and most likely result in some kind of QA testing failure before release. So here's a game I literally got from a cereal box as a kid. Disney's extremely goofy skateboarding is a skateboarding game released in 1995 to tie in with the movie Bad Boys 2, and you know what? It's pretty
no.
It has that Disney polish, I guess. Its levels, though, as well as being generally weird. I mean, I still have no idea what this place even is. It says mines, but there's quite clearly a spaceship, also no mines. And it's purple. Feature a city at night. That is also a perfect example of this.
Have you seen my balls?
Rob can't find the ball. They're behind your overgrown shaggy bush, my love.
Okay.
It's so big. I can't see them.
If your bush is overgrown, it's time to trim your hedge with the Manscaped lawnmower.
Oh, wow.
The Manscaped lawnmower features skin-safe technology to reduce cuts, nicks, and stabs when trimming your sensitive parts.
No,
And it's
not
waterproof,
yet.
so you can trim the hedges, rain or shine.
Thanks, babe.
There's a reason why over 1 million men trust Manscaped. Order your lawnmower now at manscaped.com. And for a limited time, get a free pair of Manscaped boxers, free shipping, and a free shed travel bag.
Sweet, sassy Milano! I found my balls!
That's great! I knew you would find them in there somewhere.
Well, that's cool.
Yo, it's Zion Ray. Ready to discover your ways?
Oh, it's like because, like... Battle Eye, that's what it's called. That's what it's called, is Battle Eye. You know me for that.
Basically, in short, the point I want to use this game to make is that with a Disney game, it almost definitely had a team employed not to let any spooky vibes get past. At least here in Disney's extremely goofy skateboarding anyway, so any that are here are almost definitely unintentional, because despite that, what a surprise, this level always creeps me out. Wow. Firstly, you have the fact that like every level so far, it's completely devoid of people. Anyone, which was fine when there were skate parks and building sites, but being a city, it's not normal. There's even a word for the feeling it gives off, canopsia, like a place that should be bustling with people, but isn't. Then you have the fact that the constantly changing traffic lights draw attention to the emptiness, that unnervingly huge blood moon, and like always there being no clear exit apart from maybe this tunnel that visibly stretches back for miles. But the biggest by far in any game I have ever played is in the audio department, because yeah, I've also always been one to mess with in-game audio mixing as well. Jesus, all the weird psycho habits are coming out in this. Either to pay more attention to a soundtrack or a level soundscape, or just, if only for a couple of seconds, view one of the sliders. Nothing I haven't done already in every game I've ever played, so I wasn't really expecting anything different, to be honest. So imagine my surprise hearing this. It's an odd choice, I'll leave it at that, but I think it helps make the point that in the context of Goofy's wacky antics, it's nothing but in ignoring the context. This and every other game can essentially turn into one of those surreal exploration games you find on the deep web made by serial killers. I mean, that you can apparently find on the deep web. The extreme being taking the generiest, most technically limited game possible, like Spider-Man 2 on the Game Boy Advance, a game that both shouldn't be possible while at the same time being understandable. See the message there? Just going, imagine existing in a place where the buildings are clearly just empty, textured, out-of-scale pillars, where the frame rate never exceeds 2 and you can't move without the ground distorting underneath you. Obviously, there's a lot less going on, but that kind of helps you to see how you can apply it to bigger, deeper worlds, which brings me full circle to the game that started it all. It's being the realization that not everyone thinks like me and that I might just be weird. Any Rockstar game, but especially GTA, and especially GTA 3, is somewhat of the holy grail of this kind of thing for me, both because of the sheer number and intensity of the things there are to point to. So to mention absolutely everything properly would be impossible, or at the very least require its own entire video that I know I'm going to end up making already, even if I didn't want to, just because I'm obsessed and can't shut up. Yeah, it's true that there are jokes, and that the game doesn't exactly take itself very seriously, but to me at least, the word atmosphere has always meant what's there when the game shuts up, which in the end is where I think I've been failing to make this point in the past. But still, is it actually really that? No. Because I get that in general it doesn't really matter and that I can't and shouldn't force anyone to play games the way I do, it's just that for some reason it's become really important to me to 1, be understood, and 2, be told that I'm not at least completely insane. Also, to repeat myself again though, I think it's a unique enough perspective that talking about specific examples makes for an interesting video, if nothing else. Because ultimately when that's all been said, the worst case scenario is I've either just been doing a really bad job of explaining myself, or I've made myself look like even more of a psychopath. Either way, I guess I'm about to find out. Yay. I want neither of those things.
As a healthcare worker who's been on the front lines of this crisis, how does it feel to know that vaccines are finally arriving to help fight this disease?
I will say that receiving the vaccine was an incredibly emotional experience for me. I'm based in New York City, where we were the epicenter last spring, and I saw many COVID patients. And I want to make sure that I can serve as a role model to my patients and to other healthcare professionals also, as well as the rest of the public, that vaccines are safe and effective, and there are exits out of this pandemic.
Okay, self-reflection, man. Speak it to myself.
Look at you, making progress, drinking
so.
doing laps, getting fruity in the name of health. Wait, why is he here? Stop butterflying, Michael. This is Greg's story. This is Greg's pool. Greg is making progress, and progress is perfection.
Not you. Well,
anything like me and hate fun, then you don't play games for enjoyment, but for literally any other reason than enjoyment. My favourite being to look at all of a game, including its flaws and limitations, to try and find new reasons to play it past the original or obvious intention. You know, purely for the artistic appreciation, but also because I'm cheap and like getting my money's worth. Flaws and limitations, like how outdated it might be, intentional hidden parts, how overly ambitious the developers were, or just because it's generally shit and not fit for its intended purpose, like why people still play Bad Rats or watch me. All of them, though, have the potential to turn a game into anything. My favourite, though, evident by the fact it's the one I never shut up about, is the feeling of canopsia. How eerie and unsettling a location becomes when it should be all bustling with people, noise and movement, but isn't, because creating digital environments is such a fragile and delicate art to nail perfectly. Which is a really nice way to say they fuck it up a lot. Obviously, we can just assume that that feeling exists, because if a place is empty, there's more than likely a reason for it that must have saved enough lives to deeply ingrain it into our genetic memory. And don't worry, the extent to which I'm really going to dive into that as if I'm someone who has any idea what I'm talking about ends there. Instead, I'm just going to talk about some examples of video games. More specifically, though, a certain type of video game. The type that you only ended up barely playing to begin with, only out of some sense of curiosity, and that you sure as fuck don't intend on ever going back to. So, if only to say that you had really experienced everything the game has to offer, that you've at least seen the whole game, you also fire up the obligatory, sometimes tacked on multiplayer mode on your own, if only to reluctantly cover it once you'd finished everything else. And not because you don't have any friends, even if that means just walking silently around maps made entirely around fast-paced competitive gameplay, except slowly and in silence. Which is sad, yeah, but you've done it, don't lie. And any of you that have would already be familiar with the point I'm going to be making in this video, and that's the sheer force in which a game's multiplayer maps can go from this to this.
3, 2, 1, go!
Nothing. Just silence.
Enforce on myself for no reason whatsoever other than to restrict any fun is that I avoid using horror games as an example for this, because that one feeling I go in looking for can usually be dismissed as intentional, but now that I'm thinking about it, that also absolutely applies to war games about war and that have war in them as well. Since if it's trying to be realistic, it's always handled really seriously because it's a serious subject, and I don't know about you, but next to cricket, the least fun thing I can think of would probably be war. And the most not fun of all wars has to be either one of the world wars. So World War Zero, a game based in an alternate universe where World War I and II combine to make one unstoppable super war, is probably not how I want to kick off this video. But regardless, it's an experience. A game based in an alternate universe where World War I think of would probably be war. And the most not fun of all wars has to be either one of the world wars. So World War Zero, a game based in an alternate universe where World War I and II combine to make one unstoppable super war, is probably not how I want to kick off this video. But regardless, it's an experienced development team and beautifully obvious low budget jank to the point where they couldn't even properly populate their campaign missions. Means that its multiplayer maps are collectively such a perfect example of barren, cold, and weirdly not right environments that I couldn't not at least mention it.
Sabrina Carpenter opens up even more about the love triangle drama. We'll tell you what she said about the infamous blonde girl lyric and
No more love triangles. Please, no more love triangles.
Walking around and exploring sucked me in and immersed me so much that catching myself walking around on player 2's perspective legit made me scream. Not in a nice way either. The words man-child and whimper come to mind. If ever there was something actually here though, something more than this, something to justify the unsettling feelings, it would definitely be here. The soundscape of distant gunfire, explosions, and general indicators that somewhere out there a lot of people are dying draws attention to the fact that this dense town isn't completely deserted, because it gives it life in a way, urgency, like whatever happened either just happened or is about to. Which is ultimately where the unnatural feeling comes from here, because obviously, I mean, do I even need to say it? Guess what? It is just a fucking empty map. While I'm here, though, covering war, risking my life on the front line, I also need to mention World of War, because for a game with a main menu like this, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if pressing start just played an hour-long snuff film. And it is a dark game, don't get me wrong, it's easily the darkest Call of Duty game in tone and colour, and the one that takes itself the most seriously, which ends up accounting for all of its atmosphere in every single level, including its multiplayer maps. But one, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't one of the easiest decisions I've ever had to make, but first an honourable mention has to go to this prison area from Hangar, which, saying the least, is not a super cheerful place on its own, what with the blood and corpse. That's usually the vibe that sort of thing tends to kill. But just hanging around for a good while, if you're into that sort of thing, triggers what is definitely the distant, muffled, ghostly screams of a prisoner just being brutally tortured to death. And that was just the honourable mention, because like I said, below everything this game has, miles under, there's clearly something deeper going on with Asylum. Honestly just have no idea where to even start. Chains rattling, pipes creaking, drips, deep low-end rumbling, oh, and the literal fucking sobbing ghost child stand out a bit. Again, it's really important to stress the point of this video, which isn't a map designed entirely around a game mode that's supposed to look and play like this. Hard transforms the game entirely into this. Standing around in certain areas for too long triggers ghostly whispers that stereo pan behind you to sound like they're moving, out of sight. Piano melodies can be heard coming from non-existent rooms are all just some of the reasons I'm always clinically sleep-deprived. Even this tiny area around this cutlery and pans was given its own super subtle, barely audible ambient track where they gently hit each other in the breeze. I'd be angry that they wasted so much effort and talent if it didn't mean that I wouldn't have been able to explore and discover this all on my own, amazed that I'm maybe like one of tens of other people that even care. Because every room in the entire map, and to some extent the game, has an entirely unique soundscape that are all unacceptably well designed, considering this literally could not be further away from how this game was meant to be played, especially on this map and in this mode, despite the colour palette, or lack of. Because if that tells us anything, it's either that there were some real miscommunication issues on what the game was meant to be between departments, or that it eventually became something they didn't intend, although again, despite the colour palette having been sampled from Holocaust footage. Which is why it's interesting to then transition to Ubisoft's 13, not that it makes it any less jarring, because I'm almost certain we're in for a chance of at least a good one prime having been sampled from Holocaust footage, which is why it's interesting to then transition to Ubisoft's 13. Not that it makes it any less jarring, because I'm almost certain we're in for a chance of at least a good one primary colour. Since 13 is of course famous to us most for making up that disgusting layer at the very bottom of every discount PS2 trash bin, never looking interesting or cheap enough to be actually worth buying, I've only recently, out of a combination of boredom, curiosity and the straight charitable nature of my heart, given it the chance to impress me, to find that it's actually really fucking good. To be honest, I've been less wrong in my life. Being a brighter and faster game though, it's interesting to see if that hurts the feeling I'm looking for or exaggerates it, because like Quake for example, probably the fastest game, the environments have next to no visual or sound design in favour of just focusing entirely on optimising the layout and balancing the routes through each map because of the intended speed of the gameplay. And if you can't tell already, it basically takes a shiny set of keys to keep me entertained, so when I say that Quake's maps really do nothing for me, that's more than likely why. So starting with two honourable mentions, again, the maps FBI and Bristol Swedes are reused and sectioned off areas of levels used in the game's story. The effect that had, though, is a feeling similar to open-world games like GTA that are comprised entirely of smaller areas intended for specific missions but are accessible whenever. In that, on top of being eerily empty and unnaturally still because it's a multiplayer map, it also feels like it's in wait for something, because it literally is. What it's used for hasn't happened yet. The only way it could be more perfect is if you could hear ghostly voices in the distance screaming in pain as they're tortured to death. Oh, good. Which is the point. Yeah, it's meant to be dark at least, but it's weird because the story level associated with it is set up as this massive prison complex full of thousands of inmates, so the soundscape makes sense in that context, until you have none of that, in which case it pulls a complete 180 because your imagination kicks in, although I can't help but imagine how much better it would be having not played the story at all, because imagine is all I can do now. But in the end, I think, to be fair, original tailor-made multiplayer maps is asking a bit much, especially since the point of this video is to look at tacked-on multiplayer modes. And trust me, this might as well be taped on, half hanging off the side with them awkwardly standing in front of it so you can't see it. But what about games that don't? Does having an exclusive contained theme within a multiplayer map specifically designed for multiplayer modes mean it's tonally deeper and as a result more vacant feeling? Or does that just make it a boring, glorified arena? With a game like, I don't know, let's just say, for example, Time Splitters, that was meaningless. I was going to find a way to bring this up regardless. When hit a boring, glorified arena. With a game like, I don't know, let's just say, for example, Time Splitters, that was meaningless. I was going to find a way to bring this up regardless. Where half the maps are unique to the arcade multiplayer mode and are all as insanely well designed as the campaigns with their own completely original themes and little contained storylines. I'll be the only one to ever admit, though, that Time Splitters, despite being a really good example of one, at its core is just a really simple, brutally honest game that's elevated to one of the best of all time just through sheer variety, just for amassing the biggest collection of shit. 50 different guns, 150 characters, and maps set in every time period and in every theme you could think of, including, for some fucking reason, Venice.
Italy? Yeah, I know my like places. I know my cities.
Everything. Ah, my friend, we will rebuild, I promise you. I ain't got the strength no more. Stand tall. You have a will of iron coming here, knowing your kind did all this.
What's remembered?
Ruin's plan is your enemy, not me. I come on behalf of the late Oscar of Omenham.
Still a dying from top to two. It's your meddling that led to Oswald's death. Even our kingdoms are worse.
driving down the highway, roll down the window, watch it go.
What the nomads are doing is not that different than what the pioneers did.
Whatever the devil is, big company where I roll.
One of the things I love most
Us will
about
die defending your standing, defending you. Will you not do the same?
What? Die in defense of a lost cause? I have problems of my own.
East Anglia will fall if Ruud's clan is not defeated. Fight with me to drive them off. To Oswald and your kinsmen.
Pretty words, Dave. But the men of Valhalla have their own battles to fight.
If you need an axe, I'm standing right here.
There's a village to the east, Kingsbury. It was taken by Ruud's men a fortnight ago. I'll not rest until it's back in our hands.
Let me and my raiders take the village.
Why
Save your
though?
strength.
The only wars
Join
fought
us
in
for the fight
Venice
to
were
come.
during a time when guns weren't even used, which is
Bold
blasphemous and unimaginable to a game series like this that only reluctantly got a baseball bat and melee attack 3 games in. I mean, I'm happy they did. It's my favourite map, but the whole thing definitely has an excuse for an employee excursion for research purposes flavour to it. Its layout even makes sense, connecting everything by narrow alleys and doors through joined buildings, so much so that it ends up feeling like a CSGO map in that, you know, it could well be a real place because it's as fucking dull and bland. So it absolutely at least stands out above the rest. But then you have what's a common feature with all these examples, the weird lengths they went to add depth. I've mentioned the restaurant areas already, but obviously there's also an independently moving gondola, an uncomfortably fast one. Just visually that image is a bit weird. And then there's the cathedral's bell chimes. The actual sampled bell chimes, by the way. For fuck's sake. It's not that it doesn't make any sense, because where else would they get it from? It's just that they really didn't have to. Being set at dusk is always a good start, but just because of the height of the surrounding buildings, you're always either moving through dark, cramped alleys or dimly lit rooms, not really helping with the feeling of being watched. The point I'm making, though, would be help if I could hold my attention for more than a fucking second, is that the more thought and smaller details they add to an environment, especially if it's, like I've said, just an arena, the worse it looks when it's empty, because if it was just a sequence of textureless hallways, it would feel natural being empty. This, however, does not, exaggerated by the fact that it's a really fucking good map. So ideally, what I'm looking for, and that doesn't mean I want to say this, but Star Wars games are probably going to be the best examples, specifically Battlefront 2, since it's pulling from established source material, which is, let's just say, detailed and extensive. No one's arguing against that. It's designed realistically to look and sound like the movies, benefiting from all the work put into that. Its budget and quality assurance from the companies producing it is literally unmatched. Its map size and player capacity is massive compared to other similar games, and pretty much all of them are themed to be either hellscapes or war zones, so shame it's fucking Star Wars. Like I said, I'm going with Battlefront 2 Classic, purely as a tactical decision because it has age over the normal one, so it's likely to be more lo-fi and imperfect, bringing all the jank that comes with that. And yet, though, it's still the better game. Although I'll be honest, it's not winning any awards for its fish AI. When it comes to the maps, though, anyone would expect the darkest, smallest, most cramped one with the fucking Rancor pit and torture room to be the best example for this, because I did too. And yeah, sure, it's all of those things, but they're all also just gimmicks strung together by hallways, like a really shit museum. It feels like it's just there for the drooling masses that want to clap and shout when they see something from the movies they recognize. Exactly like me, except it's with the Jedi Temple level. It benefits from being a Star Wars game because what other game would accommodate this kind of sprawling sci-fi skyline across from this quiet, dimly lit library all within some kind of religious spiritual temple? Star Trek? Yeah, probably actually. Again though, much less make it the stage in a game's multiplayer mode, so I appreciate it just existing on that fact alone, ignoring how nice and well designed the map is. Because still, just being a generic off-brand temple gives a lot to its atmosphere, since the intention behind their architecture is to make you feel small. I guess that dedicating so much clean space to something is meant to be intimidating. Will say though, not an expert, not that I feel it needs to be said when a dumb shit words it like that, because that's the point with any kind of religious building, and although I'm not sure where the template or inspiration came from, or if it was pulled entirely from established source material, regardless, it's translated perfectly, retaining all of those feelings. Some other highlights, though, include this well-lit garden area with these gold statues, this trippy maze-like server room, and again, this fucking cozy library that could only be more perfect if it had, like, some coffee there. And maybe. All of which, like I've also said, benefits massively from all the work put into the Star Wars movies' visual and sound design, because again, this is another example in which every room has its own unique ambient track, and you can only really properly appreciate them this way. Because I've been playing this game since it released, and I didn't even realise until doing this that the gonk droids made this fucking awesome low-end pulse sound. Hell yeah, I really hate getting so hung up on the sound design part, but that's definitely going in my 8-hour study mix to chill/murder younglings too. Otherwise though, it's the standard deal. Nice and dark, empty, huge, and definitely worth exploring past the fast-paced, loud and hectic way it was intended. Because in general, and to abruptly conclude now while I have the chance, because this could quite literally just never end if I had my way, I guess if this whole thing could be summarized, me freaking the fuck out that not everyone else likes the same things I do would be fair. Because if nothing else, the strange, vacant and soulless feeling will always be there, but if everything else, all the hard work and effort that went into your favourite games might actually be noticed. But then there's also the sadness associated with it in a lot of cases, because it tends to happen with older multiplayer games where the community just dissolves, leaving it full of empty ghost servers, which really just sucks if it's a game you like. So I don't know, try it maybe. It's still chill as fuck and I love it. Although I have been talking this whole time about playing multiplayer games on my own, so maybe don't listen to me.
In some places they tax flatulence, the kind that comes from cows. If you're 100 in New Mexico, you'll pay no state taxes now. In Hawaii, there's a credit for maintaining an exceptional tree.
Does having visitors on my rental property get me anything?
Absolutely. A deduction on upkeep.
Be free baloney.
Spreading expertise across Intuit TurboTax Live.
Using Squarespace helped my business grow from a journal to a website, store and class platform. My Squarespace is my headquarters.
Wow, good move. I've never really considered myself to be that good at any Mortal Kombat game. I mean, there's been times I thought I'd gotten okay, but the moment I brought that game over an internet connection, I'd always instantly be sat right back down in a big, warm, comfortable chair constructed entirely of my own humility. Call it being bad, a genuine disinterest in getting good, or just being lazy and refusing to really learn any of them properly. That's the one I usually go with. Despite all of them as a series, it always, for some reason, appealed to me way more than any other fighting game series that I'm equally, if not worse at. And just why that is something I'm always asking myself. Because, I mean, if one thing's for certain, it's that anyone still playing any of the Mortal Kombat games nowadays, if it isn't for the gore, or any of the other vast array of reasons there are to still be playing any of the Mortal Kombat games, sure isn't doing so for the story. Let's be honest, I mean, as memorable any of the other vast array of reasons there are to still be things for certain, it's that anyone still playing any of the Mortal Kombat games nowadays, if it isn't for the gore, or any of the other vast array of reasons there are to still be playing any of the Mortal Kombat games, sure isn't doing so for the story. Let's be honest, I mean, as memorable as this one cutscene was, I guarantee most people still don't even know what's happening.
No other man.
But that's not a bad...
Raise the man.
But that's not a bad thing, nor has it ever really been its fault, because panning outwards, tournament fighting games in general have always been shackled to accommodating this weirdly specific scenario. Because at this point, where two or more characters meet in an enclosed arena for a formal and orderly hand-to-hand fight where everyone follows the rules and is at least at that level courteous to each other, you're not really dealing with a story at all, it's a reason. When it's a reason, it's not a stretch to call it an excuse, and nothing good has ever happened because of an excuse. The word is only really ever used to salvage some kind of horrendous mistake. Like Mortal Kombat vs. DC. But Mortal Kombat specifically, though, above them all, has always had the hardest time fighting that battle, because guess what? Basing your entire series around being immediately shocking obviously gets way more difficult every single time, and now you're 11 games in and don't have enough inside the human body left to accurately detail in too much detail. I've always given them a lot of shit for rebooting the series after practically every game at this point, but to be fair, that probably has a lot to do with why. Again, though, that's fine, because for a series that never bothered being fair, let alone balanced, and it was definitely never a competitive game, not all the way into the 10th one, and that's being generous. As you can probably imagine, just making sense was very low on that priority list. The interesting part of that, though, is that it comes exclusively from the fact that they were arcade games, that they always had been, first and foremost, primarily made to only be played in an arcade environment, where games weren't exactly fucking Shakespearean epics anyway, where they were all practically forced into being fast, brightly loud, and hard to stand out and make the most money possible. Until, and to conclude that little story, we all already know none of them were making any money at all. Because in 2002, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance would be Midway's first all-in on an exclusive home console game, not even getting an arcade port. And where it could have, in fact probably should have, just played it safe, just been the most standard, vanilla arcade tournament fighter possible, and that financially at least would have definitely worked. It just wasn't. The only thing it is literally anything but that. Because in one of the most admirable decisions I think ever taken by any studio, they looked at what their series was, what its could do but couldn't because of the format and platform, and what they can do now there aren't any of the restrictions associated with them, realizing that the series could be a lot more than just an arcade game. They weren't limited exclusively by the rules of that whole environment and scene anymore. But finally, here they could really take their time. Focusing more on the aspect aspects of the series that had usually been reserved to background decoration and casual mentions in walls of text on screen for approximately... Aspects like a slower, darker, crushing atmosphere to reflect the literal crushing, high-fidelity graphics and sound that allowed for deeper and more detailed world-building, more game modes and side content that atmosphere to reflect the literal crushing, high-fidelity graphics and sound that allowed for deeper and more detailed world-building, more game modes and side content that lent incentive to replay the arcade ladder for longer in single sittings, also more walls of text. Among the new side content, though, was the first iteration of their Conquest mode, Mortal Kombat's first attempt at a true campaign or story mode.
I have told you much. Remember my words, for they will guide you to your destiny.
Attempt. Because honestly, you can glorify and dress up a tutorial all you want. It's still just a glorified dressed up tutorial. With the one gimmick being, though, that that was apparently meant to be you. Me. Look, there I am. Down there. If nothing else, though, and believe me, it is nothing else, it all at least feels like it was a natural solution to the issue of the game being this huge, deeper, more fleshed out entry in the series, with a brand new engine and new controls, each character having 3 unique and separate fighting styles, with each of those including a weapon and special moves, as well as an up to 10+ button branching combo. Sure, it's nothing, really, compared to some other fighting games, but obviously that was going to make a lot of the more die-hard fans of the previous games colouring book tier gameplay take a hard stance against this jump, feeling like they were overcomplicating what they were used to. So that's me just defending the fact that it's a glorified tutorial. Pick a character, do their moves. That creature down there was meant to be you because you were a monk dedicated to mastering a character to eventually using the arcade ladder, which in the end, looking back, only really succeeded in both diversifying the gameplay and playing each move off of each other, so you can earn more coins to spend on additional content to use in the arcade ladder, which you can get better at by playing the Conquest and so on. But stepping back from all of this together, we get a really good look at the point they were actually trying to make, where they wanted to take the game, what they wanted for the series. Because luckily though, right here, this is enough. Enough so that it works. It was the perfect balance of their ideas meeting their abilities. The problem was, however, at some point between here and its sequel, their ideas far surpassed their abilities. They got way too ambitious.
There are whole games within Mortal Kombat Deception that, you know, are different from the fighting game and yet still kind of integrated with the fighting game.
Conquest Mode's progression to Mortal Kombat Deception naturally took the cutscene from the previous game and stepped it up by turning it into no less than a fucking full-length open-world RPG.
Conquest Mode is just mammoth. It's a totally separate game in itself.
Complete with a day and night cycle, a day and week, month and year cycle, 6 huge separate worlds, having a character age in real time with the world. And look, straight away, before I go any further, I'm just going to come right out and say, obviously I'm not going to try and pretend this is one of the most tagged on, rushed, absolute poverty tier attempts at an open world RPG, because first of all, that's well known at this point, but really, what did you want? What were you really expecting from a side mode in a fighting game, even forgetting the scope of what it's trying to be? Because still, somehow, everything you'll hear surrounding it is people parroting the same obvious, low-hanging immediate shit, like voice acting bad.
Hello there. You are Shujinko, yes? I have heard my students speaking of you. I am teaching these young ones the basics of combat, but I think you will learn much more from Master Boraicho.
Well, for one, straight away, yeah, that's easily the most common complaint, but it's by far the dumbest because it's so blatantly being dubbed Chinese martial arts movie that if you somehow manage to miss that, it brings in a lot of very valid questions. Like, 1, where you dropped at birth. Also, why are you saying that the same people responsible for ensuring the quality of this?
Raiden's sacrifice was in vain, for the blast had little effect on the Dragon King. Now Onaga has what he needs to shape the realms as he sees fit.
Just dropped the ball here, just went, ah shit, sorry guys, my bad, already fucked that one up. Are you telling me you honestly believe that? But I am getting way ahead of myself. What I'm trying to say here, my case being simply, look, you're wrong, but specifically that this game mode within an entirely different game, within an entirely different series of games, is easily one of the most interesting, ambitious, misunderstood, and underappreciated anythings in video games. Not to downplay it or anything, although I will say I feel as if all the criticism could have been super easily avoided if it wasn't for the fact that a lot of the characters and alternate costumes from the main game are locked in chests somewhere in this mode, thus forcing the same people who bought a Mortal Kombat game to run around doing side quests in an open world RPG game. And that's just never not going to be a winning combination of two things to forcibly smash together. But still, it is what it is. A gem, obscured and crushed under a thick layer of thick people. And yeah, that doesn't change anything, how I play it or how much I enjoy it, but I still think it's interesting to point out how obvious they tried to make it all. How much effort went into making it as clear as possible that this was not supposed to be like anything that came before. To start with, straight away, visually, and in a giant leap away from the main content of the game, they slowed it right down, rounded everything, and muted the colours like I mute fucking Spotify ads. And regardless of how much this was all an intentional design choice, because it looks genuinely nice, and how much was to distance itself from the tone of the series as a whole, the effect it has is the same. This is not a game mode where you're going to be running around ripping heads, which is what everyone actually wanted and why I think it's so widely misunderstood. In fact, I don't think you'll find a clearer example of someone's work so instantly and directly communicating sit down, get comfy without actually saying it anywhere else. It's almost hilarious. And I think how badly that was all needed, because it's such a leap from the rest of the game, has a lot, if not everything, to do with that. But like I said, somehow that fucking point still managed to break the sound barrier right over their heads unnoticed. To use the sound for one example, which is literally the primary load-bearing pillar that holds up and supports this whole operation and everything there is to see and do here, I know reducing anything down to a formula is just depressing, but seeing how far in a certain direction it's strayed lends a lot to the point I'm trying to make, because the style of music from the PS2 trilogy of Mortal Kombat games is so unique, iconic, recognizable, and just good, so I don't want this to take away from it. But in every case, all of the game's major tracks consist of hard-hitting percussion and drum beats, a dynamically filtered acid lead, and if you're lucky, some butt-rock-ass guitar riffs and chords. Again, it's magic, to the point where anywhere outside of the series would have you just associating it with the series, because not only is it so original, but they didn't waste it. They did as much with the style as I think they could have. So when you take how much effort something like that must have been to establish, then witness the fucking leap to this. What we can do is look at the composer's work as their interpretation of the brief they received, then reverse engineer that to try and build a sense of what the intentions behind this whole open world game mode must have been. And then whether or not what I love so much about this whole thing is even the point. So basically, and in short, yeah, it's going to be another high octane, exciting, all thrills video.
What do we mean?
These calm, dreamy, deep synth pads with world drums playing in and out ambiently and in no real rhythm, some deeply delayed but others not. Do you get it? What more do you want? But for some reason I still feel the need to keep pretending this is some kind of secret, because turn the music down, use your eyes. The only fatality anywhere near here is how badly the draw distance is crushed under these atmospheric fog effects. And then, as a direct result of that, the terrain and skyline that's supposed to make up the backdrop is replaced entirely by a bigger, clearer view of the sky, which ends up worsening things a little bit, considering the sky is just this unnaturally fast-moving mist with the hellish-looking sun and moon always visibly poking through the smog, rapidly counting down the seconds in the day you have left. And on top of that all just being visually eerie because it looks unnatural moving this quickly, it's really creepy in concept because it's tied to the game's clock. It's too real and sobering to see this guy and everyone around him's life rapidly deplete, because it draws attention to the game mode's biggest gimmick, being that it takes place in real time across 50 years throughout the protagonist's life. You know, maybe missing out a couple of years in the interest of pacing, but something as simply put together as this little time, day, week, month, year system really puts the passage of time into context, making the whole concept really sink in. Like, you can go forward as much as you want, see and skip to anything and everything whenever you want, but you can't go back. Ever. Literally, there's no possible way to go back, not even by starting a new game or New Game Plus, because that's not even an option. Seriously, even with my file here, I've beaten the game years ago, and the only way for me to go back now would be to delete my save file, losing all my arcade and crypt progress. And I just have these memories of how the world has changed since, how the protagonist used to look as a kid, how different NPCs aren't in their usual places, taking their usual routes, and because I can't go back, they'll always just be memories. And look, used to look as a kid, how different NPCs aren't in their usual places, taking their usual routes, and because I can't go back, they'll always just be memories. And look, intentional or not, let's be honest, that's fucking deep, man. And in that sense, it does way more with time than Ocarina of Time or Chrono Trigger ever did, although to be fair, not that they were really trying to in this specific way anyway. The brutal, unrelenting, uncaring, and infinitely destructive passage of time, and to really drill that in even more, the chime to signify the passing of each in-game day is literally just like a funeral toll. I have this distinct memory of playing this game a lot years and years ago, sometimes just to launch this mode and leave it idle in certain areas while doing, like, homework. And I'd always stand in spots where I could, like, watch, for example, this old man carry fish from the beach into the village, over and over again, as days and weeks passed, seasons changed, and years went by, in what were basically just minutes for me. It's really surreal. And sometimes all you need is something like this, a metaphor, to really give you a perspective on a concept as huge and important but taken for granted as time, or at least just to realise that not much has ever really been done with it. And I mean, that's a fucking device as old as time right there. That is literally what the Bible is, for example. And yep, I did just compare those two things. And all of those aspects together come together to radiate an energy unlike any you will find anywhere else. But yeah, still, voice acting bad, right? It doesn't instill any of the usual or even the most obvious feelings that should come with something like this, like a sense of adventure, mystery, wonder, or even any kind of excitement or high-energy enthusiasm for anything. It's more trance-like and zen, which theme-wise, yeah, sweet, done, nailed it. This isolated Buddhist society feels exactly like one, and not that I'm an expert or anything, but out of all the isolated Buddhist societies I've come into contact with, this is up there. Except, oh yeah, right, it's a Mortal Kombat game, so you're always really hyper-aware of how likely the possibility is that this is just the result of someone fucking up. Like it was an administration error that allowed this. That the people responsible for this just had no creative restrictions and this is just what they wanted to make. Because, I mean, there's a slim chance this was intentional, let's be honest. Because the alternative is trying to imagine a world where 2000's Ed Boon era Midway said something along the lines of, yeah, we're gonna need an atmospheric, surreal, open-world exploration mode where the main mechanic is meditation. But what I'm saying is that all basically means that what we have here is kind of like a little miracle, something that could have only happened when the planets aligned, and whatever specific sequence of events that led to this. That all being said, though, there being a slim chance this was intentional means there is still a chance that I have to acknowledge, because Mortal Kombat is exhausting and playing any of the earlier games makes you realise just how little you can take in one sitting. So maybe they were just aware of that and built this entirely from the ground up to be the chill-out mode, the interactive wind-down lobby between fights, and that's just as rad and doesn't change the way I look at it. But considering the fact that I use it as an interactive wind-down lobby between life, it's nicer to imagine they made it as that, because then it's almost as if they made it for me. But for whatever reason, I'm happy they did, because I love it. It's interesting and strange to have this lightning perfectly captured and preserved like this, and it makes exploring it, knowing this, that much more of an experience. The unfortunate reality of the whole thing, though, still comes of how I built this up as being this huge, ambitious project they had no hope of actually achieving. Because in that sense, the base for the game, that is the world, environments, landmarks, and atmosphere, is relatively the most complete part. But still, there's no gameplay. There's fuck all to do. I mean, you can collect stuff, in that sense it's Pac-Man, it's just other than that, the encounters that are standard in JRPGs and that are the gameplay are swapped out here for Mortal Kombat, because obviously they had that ready to go, what with this being Mortal Kombat. And outside of that, what this mode is used for is generously summarized as running errands, specifically for characters, by going to one place and retrieving an item and returning it to the character. So it's basically an RPG. But what that means, and what I've come to understand about this game, is that we all need to be really realistic when we look at it, or at least sympathetic. So instead of making this a list of every colour and shape of fetch quest, I'm going to be looking at what there is, what this is as a whole, what it does best, past everywhere it's fallen short, past how it was marketed by those who made it, how it's perceived by those who've played it, and how it's unfairly criticised by everyone who went in wanting something this could never really be. Because talking to no end about what isn't here is, well, unfair, but also really pointless, especially since there is so much to see here that overlooking that in favour of the a lot of nothing is a sad waste. So in short, the only way you can really appreciate what's here is through a kind of tour. Yeah, alright, again, because that's all it can be, but that also downplays how well they did what relatively little there is. Because even if you're not into that, then at least believe me when I say this here. For what this is, an atmospheric exploration sim, it's easily one of, if not the best examples of that incredibly specific thing.
Are we there yet?
This beach, it's beautiful.
My swimsuit is hurting.
They do look small.
Come on, let's play hide and seek.
Have you seen my children?
Mom, I'm right here.
He was 6 years old this morning.
Oh no.
Mom, I'm scared.
There's something wrong with this beach.
We're chosen for a reason.
What's happening?
I don't know. I can't see. Owned only in theaters this summer.
What the hell is that? Life in a Day.
I've killed my world and I've killed my time. What about yourself?
Çok şeymiş. Bulutta iyi vekke. Ahan alınca.
That my life will pass unnoticed. What is my biggest fear? That my life will pass unnoticed. That is honestly the truest thing I've ever heard. My biggest fear is losing everybody I love. So yeah. 2 hours less. Well, that's my fucking life right there. God damn it. Fucking stand this, man. Fucking me. Not anybody else. I'm not angry at nobody else. Just fucking stupid fucking gravity. Why does gravity have to be like this? I'm not really angry at you guys. I'm just fucking pissed off. I just fucking. What the hell is with this fucking stupid fucking ghosts? Not anybody else. I can't. I'm sorry.
The Reeve has come to join me.
Fucking something keeps on knocking everything fucking over and I can't stand it. Like, I know it's okay, but like still, man. I mean. Who the hell just told me I need to leave? Who the fuck just said that? Am I losing my fucking brain?
It's been so long since I've heard that sweet sound! Praise be! Hail Dane!
I held to my oath, Reeve. I hope you will honor yours.
My promise holds, aye. Beowulf will join you in the fight against Rued's clan.
With your aid, we may yet save East Anglia.
In past times, that horn was used to muster feards all across our land. You may find others who have warmed to its call.
Good. Whatever willing men you find, rally them soon at the ruins north of Burt Castle. Whatever willing men you...
Who the fuck just said that? Who the hell just told me I need to leave? I just fucking... What the hell's with this fucking... stupid fucking ghosts? Not anybody else. I can't. I'm sorry.
The Reeve has come to join me.
Fucking something keeps on knocking everything fucking over and I can't stand it. Like, I know it's okay, but like still, man. I mean... Fucking something keeps on knocking everything fucking over and I can't stand it. Like, I know it's okay, but like still, man. I mean... knocking everything fucking over and I can't stand it. Like, I know it's okay, but like still, man. I mean... Who the hell just told me I need to leave? Who the fuck just said that? Am I losing my fucking brain?
It's been so long since I've heard that sweet sound!
Well, I just lost all my fucking hearing. I just lost all my fucking hearing. Ow. I don't know why you think it would make my hearing less, but it actually kind of like opened my ears a little bit better. I think I don't know. I'm deaf now. I can't hear. Well, but that's what happens when you hear fucking whatever the hell that was. I'll give you a hint. It sounded like this.
I'm sorry. The Reeves.
My old willing men you
What the hell is with this?
lose your hearing? Wanna lose your hearing? Wanna lose your hearing? What? I can't hear nothing.